Okay, well then, let's go ahead and get things started. This is our third day of reading The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. We're a little bit more than halfway. I expect we will probably be not, we'll probably get about to the 3/4 mark or so. I plan to get us up to maybe through chapter 17 tonight, and then we'll finish everything up on our next session, which I think is probably going to be this coming Tuesday. Hi Zian, thanks for joining us again. Just in time. Alright, well then, let's go ahead and get things started. I've got my drink ready tonight. We're going a little bit harder because it's the weekend. Alright, The Sun Also Rises, chapter 14. I do not know what time I got to bed. I remember undressing, putting on a bathrobe, and standing out on the balcony. I knew I was quite drunk, and when I came in, I put on the light over the head of the bed and started to read. I was reading a book by Turgenev. Probably I read the same 2 pages over several times. It was one of the stories in A Sportsman's Sketches. I had read it before, but it seemed quite new. The country became very clear, and the feeling of pressure in my head seemed to loosen. I was very drunk, and I did not want to shut my eyes because the room would go round and around. If I kept on reading, that feeling would pass. I heard Brett and Robert Kahn come up the stairs. Kahn said goodnight outside the door and went on up to his room. I heard Brett go into the room next door. Mike was already in bed. He had come in with me an hour before. He woke as she came in, and they talked together. I heard them laugh. I turned off the light and tried to go to sleep. It was not necessary to read anymore. I could shut my eyes without getting the wheeling sensation, but I could not sleep. There is no reason why, because it is dark, you should look at things differently from what it is light. The hell there isn't. I figured that all out once, and for 6 months I never slept with the electric light off. That was another bright idea. To hell with women anyway. To hell with you, Brett Ashley. Women made such swell friends. Awfully swell. In the first place, you had to be in love with a woman to have a basis of friendship. I had been having Brett for a friend. I had not been thinking about her side of it. I had been getting something for nothing. That only delayed the presentation of the bill. The bill always came. That was one of the swell things you could count on. I thought I had paid for everything. Not like the woman pays and pays and pays. No idea of retribution or punishment. Just exchange of values. You gave up something and got something else. Or you worked for something. You paid some way for everything that was any good. I paid my way into enough things that I liked so that I had a good time. Either you paid by learning about them, or by experience, or by taking chances, or by money. Enjoying living was learning to get your money's worth, and knowing when you had it. You could get your money's worth. The world was a good place to buy in. It seemed like a fine philosophy. In 5 years, I thought, it will seem just as silly as all the other fine philosophies I've had. Perhaps that wasn't true, though. Perhaps, as you went along, you did learn something. I did not care what it was all about. All I wanted to know was how to live in it. Maybe if you found out how to live in it, you learned from that what it was all about. I wished Mike would not behave so terribly to Con, though. Mike was a bad drunk. Brett was a good drunk. Bill was a good drunk. Con was never drunk. Mike was unpleasant after he passed a certain point. I liked to see him hurt Con. I wished he would not do it, though, because afterward it made me disgusted at myself. That was morality. Things that made you disgusted afterward. No, that must be immorality. That was a large statement. What a lot of bilge I could think up at night. What rot. I could hear Brett say it. What rot! When you were with English, you got into the habit of using English expressions in your thinking. The English spoken language, the upper classes anyway, must have fewer words than the Eskimo. Of course, I didn't know anything about the Eskimo. Maybe the Eskimo was a fine language. Say the Cherokee. I didn't know anything about the Cherokee either. The English talked with inflected phrases. One phrase to mean everything. I liked them, though. I liked the way they talked. Take Harris. Still, Harris was not the upper classes. I turned on the light again and read. I read the Turgenev. I knew that now. Reading in that oversensitized state of my mind after too much brandy. After much too much brandy. I would remember it somewhere. and afterward it would seem as though it had really happened to me. I would always have it. That was another good thing you paid for and then had. Sometime along toward daylight I went to sleep. The next 2 days in Pamplona were quiet, and there were no more rows. The town was getting ready for the fiesta. Workmen came up to the gate posts that were to shut off the side streets when the bulls were released from the corrals and came running through the streets in the morning on their way to the ring. The workmen dug holes and fitted in the timbers, each timber numbered for its regular place. Out on the plateau, beyond the town, employees of the bull ring exercised picador horses, galloping them stiff-legged on the hard, sun-baked fields behind the bull ring. The big gate of the bull ring was open, and inside the amphitheater was being swept. The ring was rolled and sprinkled, the carpenters replaced, weakened or cracked planks in the barrera. Standing in the edge of the smooth rolled sand, you could look up in the empty stands and see old women sweeping out the boxes. Outside, the fence that led from the last street of the town to the entrance of the bull ring was already in place and made a long pen. The crowd would come running down with the bulls behind them on the morning of the day of the first bullfight. Out across the plain, where the horse and cattle fair would be, some gypsies had camped had camped under the trees. The wine and aguardiente sellers were putting up their booths. One booth advertised Anis del Toro. The cloth sign hung against the planks in the hot sun. In the big square that was the center of the town, there was no change yet. We sat in the white wicker chairs on the terrace of the cafe and watched the motor buses come in and unload peasants from the country coming into the market. And we watched the buses fill up and start out with peasants sitting with their saddlebags full of the things they had bought in the town. The tall gray motor buses were the only life of the square, except for the pigeons and the man with a hose who sprinkled the graveled square and watered the streets. In the evening, there was the paseo. For an hour after dinner, everyone, all the good-looking girls, the officers from the garrison, all the fashionable people of the town, walked in the street on one side of the square, while the cafe tables filled with the regular after-dinner crowd. During the morning, I usually sat in the cafe and read the Madrid papers, and then walked in the town or out into the country. Sometimes Bill went along. Sometimes he wrote in his room. Robert Kahn spent the mornings studying Spanish, or trying to get a shave at the barber shop. Brett and Mike never got up until noon. We all had a vermouth at the cafe. It was a quiet life, and no one was drunk. I went to church a couple of times, once with Brett. She said she wanted to hear me go to confession, but I told her that not only was it impossible, but it was not as interesting as it sounded, and besides, it would be in a language she did not know. We met Kahn as we came out of the church, and although it was obvious he had followed us, yet he was very pleasant and nice, and we all three went for a walk out to the gypsy camp, and Brett had her fortune told. It was a good morning, and there were high white clouds above the mountains. It had rained a little in the night, and it was fresh and cool on the plateau, and there was a wonderful view. We all felt good, and we felt healthy, and I felt quite friendly to Kahn. You could not be upset about anything on a day like that. That was the last day before the fiesta. That was chapter 14. We'll be carrying on in just a moment, just making sure that Zoe's not up to any trouble. I heard her muddling around in the curtains a little bit ago. She'll be alright. Okay. Now, chapter 15. At noon of Sunday, the 6th of July, the fiesta exploded. There is no other way to describe it. People had been coming in all day from the country, but they were assimilated in the town, and you did not notice them. The square was as quiet in the hot sun as on any other day. The peasants were in the outlying wine shops. There they were drinking, getting ready for the fiesta. They had come in so recently from the plains and the hills that it was necessary that they make their shifting in values gradually. They could not start in the paying cafe prices. They got their money's worth in the wine shops. Money still had a definite value in hours worked and bushels of grain sold. Late in the fiesta, it would not matter what they paid, nor where they bought. Now, on the day of the starting of the fiesta of San Fermin, They had been in the wine shops of the narrow streets of the town since early morning. Going down the streets in the morning on the way to Mass in the cathedral, I heard them singing through the open doors of the shops. They were warming up. There were many people at the 11 o'clock Mass. San Fermin is also a religious festival. I walked down the hill from the cathedral and up the street to the cafe on the square. It was a little before noon. Robert, Colin, and Bill were sitting at one of the tables. The marble-top tables and the white wicker chairs were gone. They were replaced by cast-iron tables and severe folding chairs. The cafe was like a battleship, stripped for action. Today, the waiters did not leave you alone all morning to read without asking if you wanted to order something. A waiter came up as soon as I sat down. "What are you drinking?" I asked Bill and Robert. "Sherry," Colin said. "Jerez," I said to the waiter. Before the waiter brought the sherry, the rocket that announced the fiesta went up in the square. It burst, and there was a gray ball of smoke high above the Theatre Gaillard, across on the other side of the plaza. The ball of smoke hung in the sky like a shrapnel burst, and as I watched, another rocket came up to it, trickling smoke in the bright sunlight. I saw the bright flash as it burst, and another little cloud of smoke appeared. By the time the second rocket had burst, there were so many people in the arcade that had been empty a minute before that the waiter, holding the bottle high up over his head, could hardly get through the crowd to our table. People were coming into the square from all sides, and down the street were heard the pipes and the fifes and the drums coming. They were playing the Riao Riao music, the pipes shrill and the drums pounding, and behind them came the men and boys dancing. When the fifers stopped, they all crouched down in the river, and when the reed pipes and the fifes shrilled, and the flat, dry, hollow drums tapped it out again, they all went up in the air dancing. In the crowd, you only saw the heads and shoulders of the dancers going up and down. In the square, a man, bent over, was playing on a reed pipe, and a crowd of children were following him, shouting and pulling at his clothes. He came out of the square, the children following him, and piped them past the cafe and down a side street. We saw his blank, pockmarked face as he went by, piping, the children close behind him, shouting and pulling at him. "He must be the village idiot," Bill said. "My God, look at that!" Down the street came dancers. The street was solid with dancers, all men. They were all dancing in time, behind their own fifers and drummers. They were a club of some sort, and all wore workmen's blue smocks and red handkerchiefs around their necks, carried a great banner on two poles. The banner danced up and down with them as they came down, surrounded by the crowd. "Hooray for wine! Hooray for the foreigners!" was painted on the banner. "Where are the foreigners?" Robert Kahn asked. "We're the foreigners," Bill said. All the time, rockets were going up. The cafe tables were all full now. The square was emptying of people, and the crowd was filling the cafes. "Where's Brett and Mike?" Bill asked. "I'll go and get them," Colin said. "Bring them here." The fiesta was really started. It kept up day and night for 7 days. The dancing kept up, the drinking kept up, the noise went on. The things that happened could only have happened during a fiesta. Everything became quite unreal, finally, and it seemed as though nothing could have any consequences. It seemed out of place to think of consequences during the fiesta. All during the festa you had the feeling, even when it was quiet, that you had to shout any remark to make it heard. It was the same feeling as about any action. It was a fiesta, and it went on for 7 days. That afternoon was the big religious procession. San Fermin was translated from one church to another. In the procession were all the dignitaries, civil and religious. We could not see them because the crowd was too great. Ahead of the formal procession, and behind it, danced the Riao Riao dancers. There was one mass of yellow shirts dancing up and down in the crowd. All we could see of the procession, though, through the closely pressed people that crowded all the side streets and curbs, were the great giants, cigar store Indians, 30 feet high, Moors, a king and queen, whirling and waltzing solemnly to the Riao Riao. They were all standing outside the chapel where San Fermin and the dignitaries had passed in, leaving a guard of soldiers, the giants, with the men who danced in them standing beside their resting frames, and the dwarfs moving with their whacking bladders through the crowd. We started inside, and there was a smell of incense and people filing back into the church. But Brett was stopped just inside the door because she had no hat. So we went out again, and along the street that ran back from the chapel into town. The street was lined on both sides with people keeping their pace at the curb for the return of the procession. Some dancers formed a circle around Brett and started to dance. They wore big wreaths of white garlics around their necks. They took Bill and me by the arms and put us in the circle. Bill started to dance too. They were all chanting. Brett wanted to dance, but they did not want her to. They wanted her as an image to dance around. When the song ended with the sharp row row, they rushed us into a wine shop. We stood at the counter. They had Brett seated on a wine cask. It was dark in the wine shop and full of men singing, hard-voiced singing. Back of the counter, they drew the wine from casks. I put down money for the wine, but one of the men picked it up and put it back in my pocket. I want a leather wine bottle, Bill said. There's a place down the street, I said. I'll go get a couple. The dancers did not want me to go out. 3 of them were sitting on the high wine cask beside Brett, teaching her how to drink out of the wineskins. They had hung a wreath of garlics around her neck. Oop. Just a moment, I'm actually getting the call here. Alright, sorry about that. It was actually, tonight is my mother's anniversary, so we were catching up just a little bit. But, alright, let's get back to it. I want a leather bottle, Bill said. We'll wind back a little bit. There's a place down the street, I said. I'll go get a couple. The dancers did not want me to go out. 3 of them were sitting on the high wine cask beside Brett. Forgot to switch back the scene. Teaching her to drink out of the wineskins. They had hung a wreath of garlics around her neck. Someone insisted on giving her a glass. Somebody was teaching Bill a song, singing it into his ear, beating time on Bill's back. I explained to them that I would be back. Outside in the street, I went down the street, looking for the shop that made leather wine bottles. The crowd was packed on the sidewalks, and many of the shops were shuttered, and I could not find it. I walked as far as the church, looking on both sides of the street. Then I asked a man, and he took me by the arm and led me to it. The shutters were up, but the door was open. Inside, it smelled of fresh tanned leather and hot tar. A man was stenciling completed wineskins. They hung from the roof in bunches. He took one down, blew it up, screwed the nozzle tight, and then jumped on it. See, it doesn't leak. I want another one, too, a big one. He took down a big one that would hold a gallon or more from the roof. He blew it up, his cheeks puffing ahead of the wineskin, and stood on the boat, holding onto a chair. What are you guys going to do? Sell them in Bayonne? No, drink out of them. He slapped me on the back. Good man. 8 pesetas for the 2. The lowest price. The man who was stenciling the new ones and tossing them into a pile stopped. It's true. 8 pesetas is cheap. I paid and went out along the street back to the wine shop. It was darker than ever inside and very crowded. I did not see Brett and Bill, and someone said they were in the back room. At the counter, the girl filled the 2 wineskins for me. One held 2 liters, the other held 5 liters. Filling them both cost 3 pesetas, 60 centimos. Someone at the counter, that I had never seen before, tried to pay for the wine, but I finally paid for it myself. The man who had wanted to pay then bought me a drink. He would not let me buy one in return, but said he would take a rinse of the mouth from the new wine bag. He tipped the big 5-liter bag up and squeezed it so the wine hissed against the back of his throat. All right, he said, and handed the bag back. In the back room, Brett and Bill were sitting on barrels surrounded by the dancers. Everybody had his arms on everybody else's shoulders, and they were all singing. Mike was sitting on a table with several men in their shirt sleeves, eating from a bowl of tuna fish, chopped onions, and vinegar. They were all drinking wine and mopping up the oil and vinegar with the pieces of bread. Hello, Jake. Hello, Mike called. Come here. I want you to meet my friends. We're all having an hors d'oeuvre. I was introduced to the people at the table. They supplied their names to Mike and sent for a fork for me. Stop eating their dinner, Michael, Brett shouted from the wine barrels. I don't want to eat up your meal, I said when someone handed me a fork. Eat. What do you think it's all here for? I unscrewed the nozzle of the big wine bottle and handed it around. Everyone took a drink. tipping the wineskin at arm's length. Outside, above the singing, we could hear the music of the procession going by. Isn't that the procession? Mike asked. Nada, someone said. It's nothing. Drink up. Lift the bottle. Where did they find you? I asked Mike. Someone brought me here, Mike said. They said you were here. Where's Con? He's passed out, Brett called. They've put him away somewhere. Where is he? I don't know. How should we know, Bill? I think he's dead. He's not dead, Mike said. I know he's not dead. He's just passed out on Anis de Mono. As he said Anis de Mono, one of the men at the table looked up, brought out a bottle from inside his smock and handed it to me. No, I said, no thanks. Yes, arriba, up with the bottle. I took a drink. It tasted of licorice and warmed all the way. I could feel it warming in my stomach. Where the hell is Con? I don't know, Mike said. I'll ask. Where's the drunken comrade? He asked in Spanish. You want to see him? Yes, I said. Not me, said Mike. This gent. The Anis de Mono man wiped his mouth and stood up. Come on. In a back room, Robert Cohn was sleeping quietly on some wine casks. It was almost too dark to see his face. They had covered him with a coat, and another coat was folded under his head. Around his neck and on his chest was a big wreath of twisted garlics. Let him sleep, the man whispered. He's all right. 2 hours later, Cohn appeared. He came into the front room, still with the wreath of garlics around his neck. The Spaniards shouted when he came in. Cohn wiped his eyes and grinned. I must have been sleeping, he said. Oh, not at all, Brett said. You were only dead, Bill said. Aren't we going to go out and have some supper? Cohn asked. Do you want to eat? Yes, why not? I'm hungry. Eat those garlics, Robert, Mike said. I say, do eat those garlics. Cohn stood there. His sleep had made him quite all right. Let's go and eat, Brett said. I must get a bath. Come on, Bill said. Let's translate Brett to the hotel. We said goodbye to many people and shook hands with many people and went out. Outside it was dark. What time is it, do you suppose? Cohn asked. It's tomorrow, Mike said. You've been asleep 2 days. No, said Cohn. What time is it? It's 10 o'clock. What a lot we've drunk. You mean what a lot we've drunk. You went to sleep. Going down the dark streets to the hotel, we saw the skyrockets going up in the square. Down the side streets that led to the square, we saw the square solid with people, those in the center all dancing. It was a big meal at the hotel. It was the first meal of the prices being doubled for the fiesta, and there were several new courses. After the dinner, we were out in the town. I remember resolving that I would stay up all night to watch the bulls go through the streets at 6 o'clock in the morning, and being so sleepy that I went to bed around 4 o'clock. The others stayed up. My own room was locked, and I could not find the key, so I went upstairs and slept on one of the beds in Cohn's room. The fiesta was going on outside in the night, but I was too sleepy for it to keep me awake. When I woke, it was the sound of the rocket exploding that announced the release of the bulls from the corrals at the edge of town. They would race through the streets and out to the bull ring. I had been sleeping heavily, and I woke feeling I was too late. I put on a coat of Cohn's and went out on the balcony. Down below the narrow street was empty. All the balconies were crowded with people. Suddenly, a crowd came down the street. They were all running, packed close together. They passed along and up the street toward the bull ring, and behind them came more men running faster, and then some stragglers who were really running. Behind them was a little bare space. Okay, yeah, we're fine. A little bit of YouTube shenanigans there. Suddenly, a crowd came down the street, and they were all running, packed close together. They passed along and up the street toward the bull ring, and behind them came more men running faster, and then some stragglers who were really running. Behind them was a little bare space, and then the bulls galloping, tossing their heads up and down. It all went out of sight, around the corner. One man fell, rolled to the gutter, and lay quiet, but the bulls went right on and did not notice him. They were all running together. After they went out of sight, a great roar came up from the bull ring. It kept on. Then finally, the pop of the rocket. That meant the bulls had gotten through the people in the ring and into the corrals. I went back in the room and got into bed. I had been standing on the stone balcony in bare feet. I knew our crowd must have all been out at the bull ring. Back in bed, I went to sleep. Con woke me up when he came in. He started to undress and went over and closed the window, because the people on the balcony of the house just across the street were looking in. Did you see the show? I asked. Yes, we were all there. Anybody get hurt? One of the bulls got into the crowd in the ring and tossed 6 or 8 people. How did Brett like it? It was all so sudden there wasn't any time for it to bother anybody. I wish I'd been up. We didn't know where you were. We went to your room, but it was locked. Where did you stay up? We danced at some club. I got sleepy. I said, my gosh, I'm sleepy now. Con said, doesn't this thing ever stop? Not for a week. Bill opened the door and put his head in. Where were you, Jake? I saw them go through the balcony. How was it? Grand. Where are you going? To sleep. No one was up before noon. We ate at tables set out under the arcade. The town was full of people. We had to wait for a table. After lunch, we went over to the arena. It had filled up, and as the time for the bullfight came, it got fuller, and the tables were crowded closer. There was a close, crowded hum that came every day before the bullfight. The cafe did not make the same noise at any other time, no matter how crowded it was. This hum went on, and we were in it and part of it. I had taken 6 seats for all the fights. 3 of them were barreras, the first row at the ringside, and 3 were sobrepuertos, seats with wooden backs, halfway up the amphitheater. Mike thought Brett had best sit high up for her first time, and Colin wanted to sit with them. Bill and I were going to sit in the barreras, and I gave the extra ticket to a waiter to sell. Bill said something to Colin about what to do and how to look so he should not mind the horses. Bill had seen 1 season of bullfights. I'm not so worried about how I'll stand it. I'm only afraid I may be bored, Colin said. You think so? Don't look at the horses. Don't look at the horses. After the bull hits them, I said to Brett, watch the charge and see the picador try to keep the bull off. But then don't look again until the horse is dead if it's been hit. I'm a little nervy about it, Brett said. I'm worried whether I'll be able to go through with it all right. You'll be all right. There's nothing but that horse part that will bother you, and they're only in for a few minutes with each bull. Just don't watch when it's bad. She'll be all right, Mike said. I'll look after her. I don't think you'll be bored, Bill said. I'm going over to the hotel to get the glasses and the wineskin, I said. See you back here. Don't get cockeyed. I'll come along, Bill said. Brett smiled at us. We walked around through the arcade to avoid the heat of the square. That Con gets me, Bill said. He's got this Jewish superiority so strong that he thinks the only emotion he'll get out of the fight will be being bored. We'll watch him with the glasses, I said. Oh, to hell with him. He spends a lot of time there. I want him to stay there. In the hotel on the stairs, we met Montoya. Come on, said Montoya. Do you want to meet Pedro Romero? Fine, said Bill. Let's go meet it. Let's go see him. We followed Montoya up a flight and down the corridor. He's in room number 8, Montoya explained. He's getting dressed for the bullfight. Montoya knocked on the door and opened it. It was a gloomy room, with a little light coming in from the window on the narrow street. There were 2 beds, separated by a monastic partition. The electric light was on. The boy stood very straight and unsmiling in his bullfighting clothes. His jacket hung over the back of a chair. They were just finishing winding his sash. His black hair shone under the electric light. He wore a white linen shirt, and the sword handler finished his sash and stood up and stepped back. Pedro Romero nodded, seeming very far away and dignified when we shook hands. Montoya said something about what great aficionados we were, and that we wanted to wish him luck. Romero listened very seriously. Then he turned to me. He was the best-looking boy I have ever seen. You go to the bullfight, he said in English. You know English, I said, feeling like an idiot. No, he answered and smiled. One of 3 men who had been sitting on the beds came up and asked if we spoke French. Would you like me to interpret for you? Is there anything you would like to ask Pedro Romero? We thanked him. We thanked him. What was there that you would like to ask? The boy was 19 years old, alone except for his sword handler, and the 3 hangers-on, and the bullfight was to commence in 20 minutes. We wished him mucha suerte, shook hands, and went out. He was standing, straight and handsome, and altogether by himself, alone in the room, with the hangers-on as we shut the door. He's a fine boy, don't you think so? Montoya asked. He's a good-looking kid, I said. He looks like a torero, Montoya said. He has the type. He's a fine boy. We'll see how he is in the ring, Montoya said. We found the big leather wine bottle leaning against the wall in my room, and took it and filled the glasses, locked the door, and went downstairs. It was a good bullfight. Bill and I were very excited about Pedro Romero. Montoya was sitting about 10 paces away. After Romero had killed his first bill, Montoya caught his eye and nodded his head. This was a real one. There had not been a real one for a long time. Of the other two matadors, one was very fair, and the other was passable, but there were no comparison with Romero, although neither of his bulls was much. Several times during the bullfight, I looked up at Mike and Brett and Con with the glasses. They seemed to be all right. Brett did not look upset. All three were leaning forward on the concrete railing in front of them. "Let me take the glasses," Bill said. "Does Con look bored?" I asked. that slur for Jewish. Outside the ring, after the bullfight was over, you could not move in the crowd. We could not make our way through, but had to be moved with the whole thing, slowly, as a glacier, back to town. We had that disturbed emotional feeling that always comes after a bullfight, and the feeling of elation that comes after a good bullfight. The fiesta was going on, the drums pounded and the pipe music was shrill, and everywhere the flow of the crowd was broken by patches of dancers. The dancers were in a crowd, so you did not see the intricate play of the feet. All you saw was the heads and shoulders going up and down, up and down. Finally, we got out of the crowd and made for the cafe. The waiter saved chairs for the others, and we each ordered an absinthe and watched the crowd in the square and the dancers. "What do you suppose that dance is?" Bill asked. "It's a sort of jota." "They're not all the same," Bill said. "They dance differently to all the different tunes. It's swell dancing." In front of us, on a clear part of the street, a company of boys were dancing. The steps were very intricate, and their faces were intent and concentrated. They all looked down while they danced. Their rope-soled shoes tapped and spattered on the pavement. The toes touched, the heels touched, the balls of the feet touched, and then the music broke wildly and the step was finished and they were all dancing up on the street. "Here come the gentry," Bill said. They were crossing the street. "Hello, men," I said. "Hello, gents," said Brett. "You saved us seats? How nice." "I say," Mike said, "that Romero was, what's his name, is somebody. Am I wrong?" "Oh, isn't he lovely," Brett said. "And those green trousers." Brett never took her eyes off them. "I say, I must borrow your glasses tomorrow." "How did it go?" "Wonderfully. Simply perfect. I say, it is a spectacle." "How about the horses?" I couldn't help looking at them. She couldn't take her eyes off them. She's an extraordinary wench. They do have some rather awful things happen to them," Brett said. I couldn't look away, though. "Did you feel all right?" "I didn't feel badly at all." "Robert Collin did," Mike put in. "You were quite green, Robert." "The first horse did bother me," Collin said. "You weren't bored, were you?" asked Bill. Collin laughed. "No, I wasn't bored. I wish you'd forgive me that." "It's all right," Bill said, "so long as you weren't bored." "He didn't look bored," Mike said. "I thought he was going to be sick. I never felt that bad. It was just for a minute. I thought he was going to be sick. You weren't bored, were you, Robert?" "Let up on that, Mike." I said I was sorry. I said it. He was positively green. "Oh, shove it along, Michael." "You mustn't ever get bored at your first bullfight, Robert," Mike said. "It might make such a mess." "Oh, shove it along, Michael," Brett said. "He said Brett was a sadist," Mike said. "Brett's not a sadist. She's just a lovely, healthy wench." "Are you a sadist, Brett?" I asked. "Hope not." "He said Brett was a sadist just because she had a good, healthy stomach. Won't be healthy long." Bill got Mike started on something else than Con. The waiter brought the absinthe glasses. Did you really like it?" Bill asked Con. "No, I can't say I like it. I think it's a wonderful show." "God, yes. What a spectacle," Brett said. "I wish they didn't have the horse part," Con said. "They're not important," Bill said. "After a while, you never noticed anything disgusting." "It is a bit strong just at the start," Brett said. "There's a dreadful moment for me just when the bull starts for the horse." "The bulls were fine," Con said. "They were very good," Mike said. "I want to sit down below next time." Brett drank from her glass of absinthe. "She wants to see the bullfighters close by," Mike said. "They are something," Brett said. "That Romero lad is just a child." "He's a damn good-looking boy," I said. "When we were up in his room, I never saw a better-looking kid." "How old do you suppose he is?" 19 or 20. Just imagine it. The bullfight on the second day was much better than on the first. Brett sat between Mike and me at the barrera, and Bill and Colin went up above. Romero was the whole show. I do not think Brett saw any other bullfighter. No one else did either, except the hard-shelled technicians. It was all Romero. There were 2 other matadors, but they did not count. I sat beside Brett and explained to Brett what it was all about. I told her about watching the bull, not the horse. When the bulls charged the picadors and got her to watching the picador place the point of his pick so that she saw what it was all about. So that it became more something that was going on with a definite end, and less of a spectacle with unexplained horrors. I had her watch how Romero took the bull away from a falling horse with his cape, and how he held him with the cape and turned him, smoothly and suavely, never wasting the bull. She saw how Romero avoided every brusque movement, and saved his bulls for the last when he wanted them, not winded and discomposed, but smoothly worn down. She saw how close Romero always worked the bull, and I pointed out to her that the tricks the other bullfighters used to make it look as though they were working closely. She saw why they liked Romero's cape work, and why they did not like the others. Romero never made any contortions. Always it was straight and pure and natural in line. The others twisted themselves like corkscrews, their elbows raised, and leaned against the flanks of the bull after his horns had passed, to give a faked look of danger. Afterward, all that was faked turned bad and gave an unpleasant feeling. Romero's bullfighting gave real emotion, because he kept the absolute purity of line in his movements, and always, quietly and calmly, let the horns pass him close each time. He did not have to emphasize their closeness. Brett saw how something that was beautiful done close to the bull was ridiculous if it were done a little way off. I told her how since the death of Joselito, all the bullfighters had been developing a technique that simulated this old thing, with its appearance of danger in order to give a fake emotional feeling, while the bullfighter was really safe. Romero had the old thing, the holding of his purity of line through the maximum of exposure, while he dominated the bull by making him realize he was unattainable, while he prepared him for the killing. I've never seen him do an awkward thing, Brett said. You won't until he gets frightened, I said. He'll never be frightened, Mike said. He knows too damned much. He knew everything when he started. The others can't ever learn what he was born with. And God, what looks, Brett said. I believe, that she's falling in love with this bullfighter chap, Mike said. I wouldn't be surprised. Be a good chap, Jake. Don't tell her anything more about him. And tell her how they beat their old mothers. Tell me what drunks they are. Oh, frightful, Mike said. Drunk all day and spend all their time beating their poor old mothers. He looks that way, Brett said. Doesn't he? I said. They had hitched the mules to the dead bull, and then the whips cracked, and men ran, and the mules, straining forward, their legs pushing, broke into a gallop. And the bull, one horn up, his head on the side, swept a swath smoothly across the sand and out the red gate. This next is the last one. Not really, Brett said. She leaned forward to the barrera. Romero waved his picadors to their places, then stood, his cape against his chest, looking across the ring to where the bull would come out. After it was over, we went out and were pressed tight in the crowd. These bullfights are hell on one, Brett said. I'm limp as a rag. Oh, you'll get a drink, Mike said. The next day, Pedro Romero did not fight. It was Miura bulls, and a very bad bullfight. The next day, there was no bullfight scheduled, but all day and all night, the fiesta kept on. That was chapter 15. Take a brief moment, get a little bit of drink here. This is definitely a change of pace from the first 2 days. There's a lot more activity with the fiesta, and there's more of a frenetic feeling and pace to the writing and the action and everything. So it's a different flavor. Hemingway really kind of gives you a little bit of everything. In the beginning, there was just nothing at all happening, just the back and forth drama, and as it goes on, even the second day we had when they were fishing, it was just more and more words of nothing happening, just the day in, day out. And now they're really living in the moment and enjoying it, like, you feel the life of it. Alright, now, chapter 16. In the morning, it was raining. A fog had come over the mountains from the sea. You could not see the tops of the mountains. The plateau was dull and gloomy, and the shapes of the trees and the houses were changed. I walked out beyond the town to look at the weather. The bad weather was coming over the mountains from the sea. The flags in the square hung wet from the white poles, and the banners were wet and hung damp against the front of the houses. And in between the steady drizzle, the rain came down and drove everyone under the arcades and made pools of water in the square, and the streets wet and dark and deserted. Yet the fiesta kept up without any pause. It was only driven under cover. The covered seats of the bullring had been crowded with people sitting out of the rain, watching the concourse of Basque and Navarrai dancers and singers. And afterward, the Valcarlos dancers and their costumes danced down the street in the rain, the drums sounding hollow and damp, and the chiefs of the bands riding ahead on their big, heavy-footed horses, their costumes wet, the horses' coats wet in the rain. The crowd was in the cafes, and the dancers came in too, and sat their tight-wound white legs under the tables, shaking the water from their belt caps and spreading their red and purple jackets over the chairs to dry. It was raining hard outside. I left the crowd in the cafe and went over to the hotel to get shaved for dinner. I was shaving in my room when there was a knock on the door. Come in, I called. Montoya walked in. How are you? He said. Fine, I said. No bulls today. No, I said. Nothing but rain. Where are your friends? Over at the Iruña. Montoya smiled his embarrassed smile. Look, he said. Do you know the American ambassador? Yes, I said. Everybody knows the American ambassador. He's here in town, now. Yes, I said. Everybody's seen them. I've seen them too, Montoya said. He didn't say anything. I went on shaving. Sit down, I said. Let me send for a drink. No, I have to go. I finished shaving and put my face down into the bowl and washed it with cold water. Montoya was standing there looking more embarrassed. Look, he said. I've just had a message from them at the Grand Hotel that they want Pedro Romero and Marcial Lalanda to come over for coffee tonight after dinner. Well, I said, it can't hurt Marcial any. Marcial had been in San Sebastian all day. He drove over in a car this morning with Marquez. I don't think they'll be back tonight. Montoya stood embarrassed. He wanted me to say something. Don't give Romero the message, I said. You think so? Absolutely. Montoya was very pleased. I wanted to ask you because you are an American, he said. That's what I'd do. Look, said Montoya. People take a boy like that, but they don't know what he's worth. They don't know what he means. Any foreigner can flatter him. They start this grand hotel business, and in 1 year they're through. Like Alcabeño. Yes, like Alcabeño. They're a fine lot, I said. There's one American woman down here now that collects bullfighters. I know. They only want the young ones. Yes, I said. The old ones get fat. Or crazy like Gallo. Well, I said, it's easy. All you have to do is not give him the message. He's such a fine boy, said Montoya. He ought to stay with his own people. He shouldn't mix in that stuff. Won't you have a drink? I asked. No. And said Montoya, I have to go. He went out. I went downstairs and out the door and took a walk around through the arcades around the square. It was still raining. I looked in at the Iruña for the gang, and they were not there. So I walked on around the square and back to the hotel. They were eating dinner in the downstairs dining room. They were all well ahead of me, and it was no use trying to catch them. Bill was buying shoe shines for Mike. Bootblacks opened the street door, and each one Bill called over and started to work on Mike. This is the 11th time my boots have been polished, Mike said. I say, Bill is an ass. The bootblacks had evidently spread the report. Another came in. Limpia botas? He said to Bill. No, said Bill, for this senor. The bootblack knelt down beside the one at work and started on Mike's free shoe that had shone already in the electric light. Bill's a yell of laughter, Mike said. I was drinking red wine, and so far behind that I felt a little uncomfortable about all this shoe shining. I looked around the room. At the next table was Pedro Romero. He stood up when I nodded and asked me to come over and meet a friend. His table was beside ours, almost touching. I met the friend. A Madrid bullfight critic. A little man with a drawn face. I told Romero how much I liked his work, and he was very pleased. We talked Spanish, and the critic knew a little French. I reached to our table for my wine bottle, but the critic took my arm. Romero laughed. "Drink here," he said in English. He was very bashful about his English, but he was really very pleased with it. And as we went on talking, he brought out words that he was not sure of, and asked me about them. He was anxious to know the English for corrida de toros, the exact translation. Bullfight he was suspicious of. I explained that bullfight in Spanish was the lidia of a toro. The Spanish word corrida means in English the running of bulls. The French translation is course de toro. The critic put that in. There is no Spanish word for bullfight. Pedro Romero said he had learned a little English in Gibraltar. He was born in Ronda, that is, not far above Gibraltar. He started bullfighting in Malaga, in the bullfighting school there. He had only been at it 3 years. The bullfight critic joked him about the number of Malagueño expressions he used. He was 19 years old, he said. His older brother was with him as a banderillero. Shoo, lordy. But he did not live in this hotel. He lived in a smaller hotel with the other people who worked for Romero. He asked me how many times I had seen him in the ring. I told him only 3. It was really only 2, but I did not want to explain that after I had made the mistake. Where did you see me the other time? In Madrid? Yes, I lied. I had read the accounts of his 2 appearances in Madrid in the bullfight papers. So I was all right. First or the second time? The first. I was very bad, he said. The second time, I was better. You remember? He turned to the critic. He was not at all embarrassed. He talked of his work as something altogether apart from himself. There was nothing conceited or braggartly about him. I like it very much that you like my work, he said, but you haven't seen it yet. Tomorrow, if I get a good bull, I will try and show it to you. When he said this, he smiled, anxious that neither the bullfight critic nor I would think he was boasting. I am anxious to see it, the critic said. I would like to be convinced. He doesn't like my work much. Romero turned to me. He was serious. The critic explained that he liked it very much, but that so far it had been incomplete. Wait till tomorrow, if a good one comes out. Have you seen the bulls for tomorrow? The critic asked me. Yes, I saw them unloaded. Pedro Romero leaned forward. What did you think of them? Very nice, I said. About 26 arrobas. Very short horns. Haven't you seen them? Oh yes, said Romero. They won't weigh 26 arrobas, said the critic. No, said Romero. They've got bananas for horns, the critic said. You call them bananas? Asked Romero. He turned to me and smiled. You wouldn't call them bananas. No, I said. They're horns, all right. They're very short, said Pedro Romero. Very, very short. Still, they aren't bananas. I say, Jake, Brett called from the next table. You have deserted us. Just temporarily, I said. We're talking bulls. You are superior. Tell him that bulls have no balls, Mike shouted. He was drunk. Romero looked at me inquiringly. Drunk, I said. Borracho, muy borracho. You might introduce your friends, Brett said. She had not stopped looking at Pedro Romero. I asked them if they would like to have coffee with us. They both stood up. Romero's face was very brown. He had very nice manners. I introduced them all around, and they started to sit down, but there was not enough room, so we all moved over to the big table by the wall to have coffee. Mike ordered a bottle of Fundador and glasses for everybody. There was a lot of drunken talking. Tell him I think writing is lousy, Bill said. Go on, tell him. Tell him I'm ashamed of being a writer. Pedro Romero was sitting beside Brett, listening to her. Go on, tell him, Bill said. Romero looked up, smiling. This gentleman, I said, is a writer. Romero was impressed. This other one, too, I said, pointing at Con. He looks like Villalta, Romero said, looking at Bill. Raphael, doesn't he look like Villalta? I can't see it, the critic said. Really, Romero said in Spanish. He looks a lot like Villalta. What does the drunken one do? Nothing. Is that why he drinks? No, he's waiting to marry this lady. Tell him bulls have no balls, Mike shouted, very drunk from the other side of the table. What does he say? He's drunk. Jake, Mike called. Tell him bulls have no balls. You understand? I said. Yes. I was sure he didn't, so it was all right. Tell him Brett wants to see him put on those green pants. Pipe down, Mike. Tell him Brett is dying to know how he can get into those pants. Pipe down. During this, Romero was fingering his glass and talking with Brett. Brett was talking French, and he was talking Spanish and a little English, and laughing. Bill was filling the glasses. Tell him Brett wants to come into... Oh, pipe down, Mike, for Christ's sake! Romero looked up, smiling. Pipe down, I know that, he said. Just then, Montoya came into the room. He started to smile at me. Then he saw Pedro Romero with a big glass of cognac in his hand, sitting, laughing between me and a woman with bare shoulders at a table full of drunks. He did not even nod. Montoya went out of the room. Mike was on his feet, proposing a toast. Let's all drink to, he began. Pedro Romero, I said. Everybody stood up. Romero took it very seriously, and we touched glasses and drank it down. I rushing it a little because Mike was trying to make it clear that that was not at all what he was going to drink to. But it went off all right, and Pedro Romero shook hands with everyone, and he and the critic went out together. My God, he's a lovely boy, Brett said, and how I would love to see him get into those clothes. He must use a shoehorn. I started to tell him, Mike began, and Jake kept interrupting me. Why do you interrupt me? Do you think you talk Spanish better than I do? Oh, shut up, Mike. Nobody interrupted you. No, I'd like to get this settled. He turned away from me. Do you think you amount to something, Con? Do you think you belong here among us? People who are out to have a good time? For God's sake, don't be so noisy, Con. Oh, cut it out, Mike, Con said. Do you think Brett wants you here? Do you think you add to the party? Why don't you say something? I said all I had to say the other night, Mike. I'm not one of you literary chaps, Mike said shakily, and leaned against the table. I'm not clever, but I do know when I'm not wanted. Why don't you see when you're not wanted, Con? Go away. Go away, for God's sakes. Take that sad Jewish face away. Don't you think I'm right? He looked at us. Sure, I said. Let's all go over to the Arunia. No, don't you think I'm right? I love that woman. Oh, don't start that again. Do shove it along, Michael, Brett said. Don't you think I'm right, Jake? Con still sat at the table. His face had the sallow yellow look it got when he was insulted, but somehow he seemed to be enjoying it, the childish, drunken heroics of it. It was his affair with the lady of title. Jake, Mike said. He was almost crying. You know I'm right. Listen, you. He turned to Con. Go away. Go away now. But I won't go, Mike, said Con. Then I'll make you. Mike started toward him around the table. Con stood up and took off his glasses. He stood waiting, his face sallow, his hands fairly low, proudly and firmly waiting for the assault, ready to do battle for his lady love. I grabbed Mike. Come on to the cafe, I said. You can't hit him here in the hotel. Good, said Mike. Good idea. We started off. I looked back as Mike stumbled up the stairs and saw Con putting his glasses on again. Bill was sitting at the table pouring another glass of fundador. Brett was sitting, looking straight ahead at nothing. Outside on the square, it had stopped raining, and the moon was trying to get through the clouds. There was a wind blowing. The military band was playing, and the crowd was massed on the far side of the square where the fireworks specialist and his son were trying to send up fire balloons. A balloon would start up jerkily on a great bias and be torn by the wind or blown against the houses of the square. Some fell into the crowd. The magnesium flared and the fireworks exploded and chased about in the crowd. There was no one dancing in the square. The gravel was too wet. Brett came out with Bill and joined us. We stood in the crowd and watched Don Manuel Orquito, the fireworks king, standing on a little platform, carefully starting the balloons with sticks, standing above the heads of the crowd to launch the balloons off into the wind. The wind brought them all down, and Don Manuel Orquito's face was sweaty in the light of his complicated fireworks that fell into the crowd and charged and chased, sputtering and cracking between the legs of the people. The people shouted as each new luminous paper bubble careened, caught fire, and fell. They're razzing Don Manuel, Bill said. How do you know he's Don Manuel? Brett said. His name's on the program. Don Manuel Orquito, the pirotecnico of the esta ciudad. Globos Illuminados, Mike said. A collection of Globos Illuminados. That's what the paper said. The wind blew the band music away. I say, I wish one would go up, Brett said. That Don Manuel chap is furious. He's probably worked for weeks fixing them to go off, spelling out Hail to San Fermin, Bill said. Globos Illuminados, Mike said. A bunch of bloody Globos Illuminados. Come on, said Brett. We can't stand here. Her ladyship wants a drink, Mike said. How you know things, Brett said. Inside, the cafe was crowded and very noisy. No one noticed us come in. We could not find a table. There was a great noise going on. Come on, let's get out of here, Bill said. Outside, the paseo was going in under the arcade. There were some English and Americans from Biarritz in sport clothes scattered at the tables. Some of the women stared at the people going by with the lorgnones. We had acquired, at some time, a friend of Bill's from Biarritz. She was staying with another girl at the Grand Hotel. The other girl had a headache and had gone to bed. Here's the pub, Mike said. It was the Bar Milano, a small, tough bar where you could get food and where they danced in the back room. We all sat down at the table and ordered a bottle of Fundador. The bar was not full, and there was nothing going on. This is a hell of a place, Bill said. It's too early. Let's take the bottle and come back later, Bill said. I don't want to sit here on a night like this. Let's go and take a look at the English, Mike said. I love to look at the English. They're awful, Bill said. Where did they all come from? They come from Biarritz, Mike said. They come to see the last day of the quaint little Spanish fiesta. I'll fess to them, Bill said. You're an extraordinarily beautiful girl, Mike turned to Bill's friend. When did you come here? Come off it, Michael. I say, she is a lovely girl. Where have I been? Where have I been looking all this while? You're a lovely thing. Have we met? Come along with me and Bill. We're going to festa the English. I'll festa them, Bill said. What the hell are they doing at this fiesta? Come on, Mike said. Just us three. We're going to festa the bloody English. I hope you're not English. I'm Scotch. I hate the English. We're going to festa them. Come on, Bill. Through the window we saw them, all three, arm in arm, going toward the cafe. Rockets were going up in the square. I'm going to sit here, Brett said. I'll stay with you, Con said. Oh, don't, Brett said. For God's sake, go off somewhere. Can't you see Jake and I want to talk? I didn't, Con said. I thought I'd sit here because I felt a little tight. What a hell of a reason for sitting with anyone. If you're tight, go to bed. Go on to bed. Was I rude enough to him? Brett asked. Colin was gone. My God, I'm so sick of him. He doesn't add much to the gaiety. He depresses me so. He's behaved very badly. Damned badly. He had a chance to behave so well. He's probably waiting just outside the door now. Yes, he would. You know, I do know how he feels. He can't believe it didn't mean anything. I know. Nobody else would behave as badly. Oh, I'm sick of the whole thing. And Michael. Michael's been lovely, too. It's been damned hard on Mike. Yes, but he didn't need to be a swine. Everybody behaves badly, I said. Give them the proper chance. You wouldn't behave badly, Brett looked at me. I'd be as big an ass as Con, I said. Darling, let's talk a lot of rot. All right, talk about anything you like. Don't be difficult. You're the only person I've got, and I feel rather awful tonight. You've got Mike. Yes, Mike. Hasn't he been pretty? Well, I said, it's been damned hard on Mike, having Colin around and seeing him with you. Don't I know it, darling? Please, don't make me feel any worse than I do. Brett was nervous, as I had never seen her before. She kept looking away from me and looking ahead at the wall. Want to go for a walk? Yes, come on. I corked up the Fundador bottle and gave it to the bartender. Let's have one more drink of that, Brett said. My nerves are rotten. We each drank a glass of the smooth Amontillado brandy. Come on, said Brett. As we came out the door, I saw Con walk out from under the arcade. He was there, Brett said. He can't be away from you. Poor devil. I'm not sorry for him. I hate him myself. I hate him too, she shivered. I hate this damned suffering. We walked arm in arm down the side street, away from the crowd and the lights of the square. The street was dark and wet, and we walked along it to the fortifications at the edge of town. We passed wine shops with light coming out from the doors onto the black, wet street, and sudden bursts of music. Want to go in? No. We walked out across the wet grass and onto the stone wall of the fortifications. I spread a newspaper on the stone, and Brett sat down. Across the plain it was dark, and we could see the mountains. The wind was high up and took clouds across the moon. Below us were the dark pits of the fortifications. Behind were the trees and the shadow of the cathedral, and the town silhouetted against the moon. Don't feel bad, I said. I feel like hell, Brett said. Don't let's talk. We looked out at the plain. The long lines of trees were dark in the moonlight. There were the lights of a car on the road climbing the mountain. Up on the top of the mountain, we saw the lights of the fort. Below, to the left, was the river. It was high from the rain, and black and smooth. Trees were dark along the banks. We sat and looked out. Brett stared straight ahead. Suddenly, she shivered. It's cold. Want to walk back? Through the park. We climbed down. It was clouding over again. In the park, it was dark under the trees. Do you still love me, Jake? Yes, I said. Because I'm a goner. Brett said. How? I'm a goner. I'm mad about the Romero boy. I'm in love with him, I think. I wouldn't be if I were you. I can't help it. I'm a goner. It's tearing me all up inside. Don't do it. I can't help it. I've never been able to help anything. You ought to stop it. How can I stop it? I can't stop things. Feel that? Her hand was trembling. I'm like that all through. You oughtn't to do it. I can't help it. I'm a goner now anyway. Don't you see the difference? No. I've got to do something. I've got to do something. I really want to do. I've lost my self-respect. You don't have to do that. Oh, darling, don't be difficult. What do you think it's meant to have that damn Jew about? And Mike, the way he's acted? Sure. I can't just stay tight all the time. No. Oh, darling, please stay by me. Please stay by me and see me through this. Sure. I don't say it's right. It is right, though, for me. God knows I've never felt such a bitch. What do you want me to do? Come on, Brett said. Let's go and find him. Together, we walked down the gravel path in the park in the dark, under the trees, and then out from under the trees and past the gate into the street that led into town. Pedro Romero was in the cafe. He was at a table with other bullfighters and bullfight critics. They were smoking cigars. When we came in, they looked up. Romero smiled and bowed. We sat down at a table halfway down the room. Ask him to come over and have a drink. Not yet. He'll come over. I can't look at him. He's nice to look at, I said. I have always done just what I wanted. I know. I do feel such a bitch. Well, I said, my God, the things a woman goes through. Yes? Oh, I do feel such a bitch. I looked across the table. Pedro Romero smiled. He said something to the other people at his table and stood up. He came over to our table. I stood up and we shook hands. Won't you have a drink? You must have a drink with me, he said. He seated himself, asking Brett's permission without saying anything. He had very nice manners, but he kept on smoking his cigar. It went well with his face. You like cigars? I asked. Oh yes, I always smoke cigars. It was part of his system of authority. It made him seem older. I noticed his skin. It was clear and smooth and very brown. There was a triangular scar on his cheekbone. I saw he was watching Brett. He felt there was something between them. He must have felt it when Brett gave him her hand. He was being very careful. I think he was sure, but he did not want to make any mistake. You fight tomorrow? I said. Yes, he said. Algabeño was hurt today in the Madrid. Do you hear? No, I said. Badly? He shook his head. Nothing. Here. He showed his hand. Brett reached out and spread the fingers apart. Oh, he said in English. You tell fortunes? Sometimes. Do you mind? No, I like it. He spread his hand flat on the table. Tell me, I live for always, and be a millionaire. He was still very polite, but he was surer of himself. Look, he said, do you see any bowls in my hand? He laughed. His hand was very fine, and the wrist was small. There are thousands of bowls, Brett said, but she was not nervous at all now. She looked lovely. Good, Romero laughed. At 1,000 duros apiece, he said to me in Spanish. Tell me some more. It's a good hand, Brett said. I think he'll live a long time. Say it to me, not to your friend. I said you'd live a long time. I know it, Romero said. I'm never going to die. I tapped with my fingertips on the table. Romero saw it. He shook his head. No, don't do that. The bulls are my best friends. I translated to Brett. You kill your friends? She asked. Always, he said in English, and laughed. So they don't kill me. He looked at her across the table. You know English well. Yes, he said. Pretty well, sometimes. But I must not let anybody know. It would be very bad, a torero who speaks English. Why? Asked Brett. It would be bad. The people would not like it. Not yet. Why not? They would not like it. Bullfighters are not like that. What are bullfighters like? He laughed and tipped his hat down over his eyes and changed the angle of his cigar and the expression of his face. Like at the table? He said. I glanced over. He had mimicked exactly the expression of Nacional. He smiled, his face natural again. No, I must forget English. Don't forget it yet, Brett said. No? No. All right. He laughed again. I would like a hat like that, Brett said. Good. I'll get you one. Right. See that you do. I will. I'll get you one tonight. I stood up. Romero rose too. Sit down, I said. I must go and find our friends and bring them here. He looked at me. It was a final look to ask if we were understood. It was understood, all right. Sit down, Brett said to him. You must teach me Spanish. He sat down and looked at her across the table. I went out. The hard-eyed people at the bullfighter table watched me go. It was not pleasant. When I came back and looked in the cafe, 20 minutes later, Brett and Pedro Romero were gone. The coffee glasses and our 3 empty cognac glasses were on the table. A waiter came with a cloth and picked up the glasses and mopped off the table. That's the end of chapter 16. Let me see how much we have left. Let's see. About 74% of the way through. 17, 18, 19. That's probably about where we'll stop reading tonight. Leaves us with about an hour worth of reading for the next session. We're at the height of the fiesta, coming up on the last day. Brett has hooked up with Pedro, and everything is going all swimmingly with the friends. I'm sure those who've read it know what's coming. Those who have not are probably have an idea, but this whole thing is like watching a soap opera. It's some of the worst people, the worst friends of each other that are somehow the best of friends, and they're all just getting along in the best and worst of ways. WCGW. I'm not sure I know that. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Getting the bullfighter drunk and hooking up for his last night. What could possibly go wrong? But yeah, so we'll look forward to that tomorrow. The beautiful, beautiful train wreck that is this end of this fiesta. And I think we're probably just gonna go ahead and call it an early night tonight. We're still trying to figure out a good pacing for how much and how long we should go, and I kind of like the 4-part for this book in particular. And I guess we need to start thinking about what the next book will be. This one was kind of picked out of a hat for what to get us started. Bit of a classic, but really I'm open to reading just about anything. I prefer to stick to public domain, so things on Gutenberg, um, and so I'll look around and see anything looks fun. Might try and branch out a little bit. We'll see what we've got. But until then, we'll go ahead and finish tonight. And I think our next stream is going to be on Tuesday. Gonna take a day off and save my throat a little bit. We'll try and get our frequency. I think I'd like to aim for about 3 to 4 nights a week. So we'll see how it goes. So, all right. Thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Feel free to comment if you've got any thoughts on the book or our narration, or just want to say hi to Zoe. She's hanging out on the desk right now. So, all right. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you very much.